Afternoon, everybody. It's Aaron from Weekends with the Camper. I'm here going to give you a list of things you should know before you camp on a permanent site or set up on a permanent site. So let's start off with the worst ones. So, the worst ones is your sewer, your black tank, your gray tanks. So you're thinking, well, I'm hooked up, full hookups, full sewer, full water, full electricity. You don't need to pull that dump valve again. Don't think like that. You do. And I would recommend doing it often. So here are the first two items on my list. One, keep your tank closed unless you're dumping it and flushing it. Let's put it this way, your camper is not set up like your sewer at home. You have tanks, storage tanks, which hold all your black and all your gray and all your fresh. So let's put it this way, if you open up your black tank and leave it, you are going to end up with a really big mess in a very short time. And it's not going to be fun, and it's going to stink. So leave your black tank and your gray tank closed unless you are flushing it out or draining the tanks. So here we are at my tanks, my tank valves. As you can see, my tanks are closed. There's the reason for that. Like, this tank here is for my black, this one's for my gray. The reason I leave them closed, unless I'm flushing or draining, they are always closed. And the reason I do that is because your RV is set up with tanks and not a direct sewer line. This is not like your house where when you flush it, it goes down to the sewer. When you flush anything down that toilet, it goes into a holding tank. And if you have that tank open, only your water drains away from that pipe that comes from your toilet. So in a very short time, all that toilet paper, all that human waste will build up and build up and build up until it gets to the point it can't go down anymore. And when it does that, you have a really shitty situation on your hand. This isn't going to be fun. It's going to be messy, and it's going to stink. So keep those tanks closed until you flush and drain. Number two is flush and drain your tanks regularly. I do mine every 3 to 4 days. And that's just so I can keep my tanks clean, keep it from stinking up, because nobody wants to smell that. On top of that, it builds up to the point where it does start smelling in the camper. That's methane gas too in there, and it can make you sick. It can also kill you. So keep them clean and do it on a regular basis. My wife and I, we stay in this camper 5 to 7 days a week. We go home a couple days at a shot, so we do it 2 times a week, 3 times a week if we need to. My neighbors behind me, and behind me, and almost everybody down that lane down there are here for the weekends. So they flush their tanks on Sundays before they go home. And I've watched them do it, and they are very adamant about not walking into a camper come next week and having a really bad smell in their camper. So make sure you do it on a regular basis. Now another thing along with your flushes, this is number 3. Don't be afraid to run chemicals There are chemicals that will help clean your tank out. My tanks have tank flushes in them, but I still run chemicals in there. And that's just to help break down any solid waste, any toilet paper, anything that goes down that toilet, down that sink, down the shower, anything. It just helps keep the odor down, keeps the tanks clean, and everything else. And since we're still on your black tanks and your sewer and the waste disposal and all that stuff, please invest a little bit of time and a little bit of money into making something stable and solid for your sewer. I'm still using a couple of the flexible hoses that you would stick in your rear bumper of the camper. There is an adapter so you can go to PVC type pipe, and just make sure you have the correct angles, make sure they're nice and solid and sealed, and make it look as pretty as possible. You are in a community RV park here, so you don't want to be the one that does things half-assed and always having accidents. That would be the worst case scenario. Best case scenario, you just have to replace a hose every now and then because they start to degrade because of the sun. It is just plastic, and it's not the strongest and thickest plastic. Those little flexible hoses are meant to be thrown away, in my opinion. Get a good couple months out of them, throw them away, put a new one in. That's kind of how I'm doing it right now until I figure out how to set up my RV for solid PVC pipe. Now let's move on to number 5. Number 5 is get a surge protector. If you go out and buy a brand new camper, and a lot of these campers, especially if you're going into a fifth wheel, are $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. Another $300-$400 is not going to break the bank for you on you. Get a surge protector. They may just save you several thousands of dollars in the long run. And I've done this in a previous video where my watchdog that I have on my camper, this guy will tell me if I'm under voltage, over voltage, if I have a surge, wires are wired wrong, I lose a leg, so I only have power to one side of my camper. It'll tell me a lot of different things. On top of that, it's Bluetooth connectable to the phone that I'm recording this video on. And it'll tell me how much amperage I'm drawing on each leg, how many watts I'm drawing, what my voltage is, and all sorts of stuff. That $300 inverter, or a $300 surge protector, will save me, if something would happen, an easy 5 to 10 grand, because the inverter that runs my refrigerator in this new camper, between the two, I'm probably pushing $3,000 to $4,000. And you get into some of the bigger Montanas and bigger toy haulers, and the higher class campers, the 80, 90,000, $100,000 campers, you want to protect that, because it's not worth saving $300 when you end up having to spend several $1,000s to fix everything. Now, one other thing that you need to add, which moves me on to number 6, get a pressure regulator. Currently I am running a small one, and it's a cheap one. and it regulates my pressure to about 40 to 50 psi. I know PEX tubing can handle more, but it's not the PEX tubing I'm worried about. It's the fittings that come with some of these RV plumbing supplies. They might not be rated for the 80 and 90 psi that you have at home or that I have here at the campground. I do know it restricts my flow. I have been trying to find something that doesn't restrict the flow, but it kind of goes hand in hand. Control the pressure, control the flow, or you lose flow. So if anybody has a good one that they know of that doesn't really restrict and can prove it, and let me know, because I would love to try it. Now, going on to the next one, I believe that would be number 6. Put a filter system on your water system. I have one right there. And I just pulled that one off the other day. Which I need to replace. Yes, I'm running 2 filters on my camper. There's a lot of iron taste in this water, so I'd much rather keep as much iron and hard sediments out of my system as I can. So I will replace filters and keep my lines clean, and so I don't have to worry about it. Now, number 7. You will probably think I'm kind of stupid for doing this, but it has saved my wife and I a lot of headache doing this. Is fill your freshwater tank. And the reason is with all these campers that I have around me and down the alleys, we are all pretty much on the same pipe of water. So when my neighbor to the north of me takes a shower, and my neighbor to the south of me decides he wants to water grass, and me in the center want to take the shower, and 5 campers down someone else is watering the grass, you see where I'm going for this. The more people using water, the less water pressure and water flow you have. And right now, because of the heat index out here is about 102 now. It's 93 degrees. The farmers, the rural water that's coming into our facility, the farmers are using more water, whether it's for irrigation or watering their livestock, which means they're taking off what we would normally have too. So our water pressure is really dropping to the point where you can't hardly turn the bathroom sink on to brush your teeth. You don't need a lot of water for that. But when it just drips out, or you go to flush the toilet and you get just a couple dribbles out and you got something sitting in the middle of the bowl that's not going to go down, you'll be glad that you'll have that freshwater tank full of water, so you can go up, flip the water pump on, and use water. It's a trick a friend of mine from this campsite taught me last year, and I've done it ever since with my travel trailer and with my fifth wheel here. Now, along with that, if you go long periods of time without using that water, which brings me to number 8, drain that tank and fill it again. You know, flush the system out. Put fresh water in every week, whatever your preference is. You don't want, fresh water's tanks do start to go stale. I mean, they say water bottles in the store, if they're in there for too long, they'll go stale. While these are open to the environment, they do have some water that, or air that goes in and out of there. So you will end up with, possibly some stale water. Flush it out regularly and change it. Let's move on to number 9. Number 9 is just do a general inspection of your camper regularly. Get on the roof. Check for cracks in the roof lining. Check for cracks in the sealant. Walk around, check for cracks around the sealant, around the sides, the bottoms, anywhere that water could come in. Check for it. Look for it. I do it once a month. It's just kind of habit for me, If you end up with a seal that's starting to look a little degraded, cracked, dried up, peel it off, put new caulking in. It's not real difficult, and it could save you in the long run. Nobody wants water in their camper, and if you do, you're looking for an insurance fraud check. But I certainly don't, after spending how much I did for my site and for my camper. I want to keep it as pristine as possible, but comes with use is wear and tear, so I just do a simple inspection. Let's move on to number 10. While you're on the roof, check your air conditioning units out. Pull the cover off. Most cases it's going to be 4 screws. Pop the cover off and look inside. I do it every month. These don't get the wind blowing through them like most of the other ones that go down the road to the local state campground. So they don't really blow themselves out. But even if I was doing it weekend warrior style and going out once every 3 weeks or 4 weeks down to the local campground, I would still get on my roof probably every time just to check over the air conditioning units and make sure they're cleaned out. If the condensers are full of cotton, like we have around here, all the cottonwoods, take a garden hose out there, shut the unit off, and wash them out. Clean them up. Be careful not to bend over the fins, because the more air you block from going through that coil, the worse you'll be. So keep them clean. The more airflow that goes through them, the more it'll keep you cool in the camper. Along with that, go inside, clean out the filters. It's no different than your furnace at home. You either have to change the filters every month or every few months, depending on how big your filter and what kind of system you have. These are no different. Clean your air filters out. The more air restriction you have, the worse you will feel. There'll be less cold air, even to the point where it could freeze up, and because there is no air going through there. You freeze your air conditioners up, you might as well shut them off for a couple hours and sweat it out outside. With no air going through those air conditioners and they're frozen solid, you're just waiting for the ice to melt now. So keep them clean. The inside units, the filter, or the outside units, and the filters on the inside. So there's my number 10 and my number 11. Number 12, you guys are going to hate me. And what I'm stating is pretty much a proven fact, unless you are a construction worker or traveling from site to site and living in your camper. But if you have a full-time RV spot like I do, and like everybody else does in this campground, you are more than likely going to have to get a deck. Your wives, girlfriends, family, they are going to get sick of going up and down the steps, and especially if you have one of the older step styles where they hang in the air and they flex and they creak and they just don't feel sturdy, you are going to get a deck. Just figure it out, because you're going to. I told the wife we don't need a deck. the first year. 2 months in, we had a deck. That's number 11. Number 12, you guys are still going to hate me. Because number 12 is some sort of transportation. We thought, well, it'll be great exercise. We can walk to the clubhouse, we can walk to friends at other sites, we can walk to the river and go swimming. That lasted about a month and a half. And now we can't live without it. But that would be that guy. We use it all the time. Run to the camp or run over to other friends' campers. We use it to take the garbage to the other side so we don't have to put it in the box of the truck or in the back of the SUV. We take it to the river. We take it to the clubhouse. We take it everywhere. We just take it for a spin around the campground just to go for a drive. It's either something like that, or you'll get a side-by-side, or a four-wheeler, or something. But you will more than likely get one. So be prepared. There are 2 more expenses that you're going to add. The deck and the mode of transportation. Number 14. You are setting this up for a permanent site. Spend some time, get the equipment, and make your camper as stable as possible. I have, for my 5th wheel, I have one of the Kingpin stabilizers. I have also a frame stabilizer. That was a gift from a friend. I no longer needed it. It was a homemade job, but it still does the trick. Nothing worse than waking up in the middle of the night because there are kids rolling around or shaking the camper. You could do it all the way up to and more if you wanted to. My neighbor back behind me actually has cinder blocks and 4x4 blocks all the way up to the frame to stabilize their camper to the point it barely moves. On top of that, if you spend any time with storms, just the standard camper leveling blocks or leveling jacks might not be enough to keep your camper from rocking around on you. It's not fun. You don't want to be seasick in your camper in the middle of the night because someone's walking around, or there's a little bit of breeze that night, or even a 20-mile-an-hour wind where it kind of shakes the camper. You want that camper as solid as possible. Now, if you plan on going around and pulling in and out every few weeks, you're not going to go to the point of putting cinder blocks and blocks underneath your camper all the way up to the frame, but you may want to put a few more supporting braces underneath there. Lippert's got a couple different setups to help stabilize and keep the rock down. Look into them. It's well worth the money. Number 15. You guys, some of you guys might appreciate this, some of you won't, but just because you're at a campsite in a campground doesn't mean you're going to cook on the fire all day or every day. One, you'll go through a lot of wood, and that's hard work, or it can get expensive depending on how you do it. I cut and split my own, but I do know there's a lot of people that just go out and buy the $5 bundles. Well, those little $5 bundles don't last long, especially when you're cooking for a family of 4 or even a family of 2 like me and my wife do. So look at getting a good grill. Whether you want the pellet grill or you want just a nice little propane gas grill, look at getting a grill, because you are not going to cook on that fire every day, especially days like today where our high was 97 and our heat index was over 100. You ain't going to stand by a fire that's putting out 500 degrees and trying to cook burgers or anything. A nice little gas grill, throw it in there, walk away from it, go sit inside, stay cool, come out and check on it every few minutes or whatever it takes that you're cooking, and it keeps the heat out of the camper, keeps you out of the fire and out of the heat. And sometimes some people just like the gas grill or the pellet grill better than wood, over a fire pit. So get yourself a nice gas grill. Now the next 3 kind of roll together. Number 15, number 16, and number 17. No, that would be wrong. Now the next 3 kind of roll together. Number 16, 17, and 18. Number 16, keep your campground site clean. You don't want to be the messy one in the neighborhood. You have an expensive site, you have an expensive camper. Even if it's not an expensive camper, you don't want to be the messy Marvin of the group. I know messes happen. I've done some construction, made a mess, picked it up, done it again, done it again, done it again. It don't take that long to clean up your mess. So remember, keep your site clean. That would be number 16. Number 17, meet your neighbors. Your neighbors can help you out a lot. I help my neighbors out. I help a couple of them build their decks. They've come over and offered help for us, but I'm too stubborn to take help. My own fault, not theirs. Meet your neighbors, be friends with them, because you will probably be seeing them more than you ever think you will. Especially if you're more or less living there, you will see your neighbors on a regular basis. So meet your neighbors, be friends with your neighbors. Nothing worse than having bad neighbors or you being the bad neighbor. Nobody will want to be around you. Nobody wants to go over and see you. Be social, even though we're supposed to be social distancing. Be social, be friendly. And number 18, follow quiet times. Like I said, we live in our camper 5 to 7 days a week. We don't like having to go over to the neighbor's camper at 2 o'clock in the morning because they have the radio blaring and they have a party out there and they're drunk and they're having a good time. It's not fun for anybody. You don't want to be thrown out because you're too loud. You don't want neighbors that don't like you because you're too loud. I mean, there are people, even on Saturdays and Sundays, that have to get up early and go somewhere. Go to work, go to, a child's sporting event. Anything. Being kept up all night is not fun. It may be fun for the guys that are keeping you up all night, but it ain't fun for the rest of us around you. So follow quiet times and become, courteous to your neighbors. It's very simple. I mean, I have no problems. I've walked the dog at 4 o'clock in the morning and there are people still sitting up. And the only reason I noticed that they were still up is they had the fire going. I couldn't hear them. They were literally my back door neighbor. I could not hear them. They were just relaxing, having a good chit chat. They having a good time, but they were not loud. I'm not going to tell them that they have to go to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning. Neither should you. You should just have common courtesy and be friendly. So now let's move on to number 19. So, number 19. This one is a very important one. I really don't care if you don't think it's important, but I certainly do. And anybody who's ever had to clean a refrigerator that died, or you lost power, and everything in your camper refrigerator thawed and went rotten, will agree with me. Keep your air conditioner on while you are away. And the reason I say that is your air conditioning units are what keeping your refrigerator cool from overheating. These refrigerators, I don't care if they're the propane electric style RV style or like the Samsung home style that I have in my camper. They are not designed to run in 120, 130, 140 degree heat that your campers are capable of reaching in 100 degree weather in direct sunlight. If you don't think your camper will reach 120 degrees, I'm beg to differ. Those campers are really big tin boxes and they absorb heat. The older ones are worse than the newer ones. The newer ones have more insulation, but the older ones keep your air conditioners on. It'll save you the rotten smell of meat, chicken, pork, beef, spoiled milk. What else can go? I mean, fish. If you got fish, nobody wants to walk into their camper and smell that rancid odor. And if you've done it, you know what I mean. I have talked to several other campgrounds before we picked our spot here, and they actually told us that when we have our RV there, even though we pay for our electricity because we're here full time, or we have a permanent spot, we're not paying by the month or by the night or the week. We pay for our electricity here. And I have no problems leaving my air conditioner on when I go home for 3 days, go home for a week, go home for 2 weeks. The reason I do it is when I walk back into my camper, granted, if it's 100 degrees out and walking into 80 degree air, it feels good, but that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I want my refrigerator to hold up to the heat, or not to hold up to the heat, to hold up and keep all my fresh, good food good. I don't want to clean the stinky, rotten food out. So keep your air conditioners on. At least run them up to 80 degrees when you're gone. I mean, you don't have to keep them at 65 or 70 where you do it when you're there, but don't go much higher than 80 degrees. Keep them cool. That'll keep your refrigerators cool, because they still have to run cool. They have to cool themselves to cool the air inside it. That is my 19 must-knows in a permanent situation like we are sitting. Please like and subscribe and follow and let me know what you think. Thank you.